Well, the United Nations Security Council has adopted a draft resolution endorsing a three-phased ceasefire proposal between Israel and Hamas. The US-authored draft received 14 votes in favor with a single abstention from Russia. This successful effort in New York aims to complement regional efforts, including US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's ongoing visit to secure agreement on the proposal from both parties. Now, let's get analysis on this. We're now joined by Patrick Kadima, Wits University International Relations Analyst. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Kadima. So we know, of course, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is again in the Middle East. I think it's the 8th time, to push the latest proposal. Let's then talk about the key components of this proposed three-phased ceasefire, deal between Israel and Hamas. How will the delivery look like, and what would, it seek to address, do you think?
Good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers. So essentially, as we've seen, the three-phased ceasefire plan that has been backed by the United Nations Security Council will include, the exchange of hostages and the reconstruction of Gaza, as well as, which will essentially also allow for humanitarian aid to be allowed to go through. So essentially, those are some of the things that have been that the latest United Nations Security Council resolution has set itself to achieve. But we'll have to wait and see whether these two parties that apart, the Israel government and Hamas will abide by those by the UN Security Council resolution.
I mean, we are told that Israel is endorsing, some of the proposal. I'm not sure what you are hearing, but what is the likelihood, as Israel continues to carry out airstrikes in Gaza, that it has agreed in part to this agreement? And when are we likely then to see these being effected?
It's a very difficult one to say, but the United Nations Security Council says it must be effective immediately without conditions. But then you see Israel going out there to say, they were only shown part of the proposal and are yet to agree to everything. So it's up to America to now speak to Israel to try influence Israel to abide by this United Nations Security Council. By the way, it was not an easy one, despite unity in terms of this resolution. A lot of work had to go into this, and it became difficult for China and Russia to veto this because the Palestinian Authority had backed it, had backed this U.S. proposal, and now it became difficult for China and Russia to veto this, and Russia had to abstain from this, and while the others voted in favor. So it puts a lot of pressure on these two parties. It puts a lot of pressure on Israel that the international community, now a deeply polarized United Nations Security Council in such an instance, has voted for this resolution, and now it's up to Israel to accept whether it will abide by these resolutions. But at the end of the day, we also saw from Hamas, welcoming this resolution, but we are yet to see whether officially it accepts this ceasefire plan. But whatever has happened at the United Nations Security Council, it now puts both parties at crossroads to accept this. It puts the allies of both parties to put pressure on them to accept and bring an end to these hostilities, because it has been going on for a very long time. Lives have been lost, and something has to give in.
Absolutely. I mean, this war has been going on since a very long time, as you say. Now, just going back to the Security Council having adopted this draft resolution, endorsing this three-phased ceasefire proposal, a lot then questions being asked about, the humanitarian component of this particular war and what are we likely to see. I mean, just earlier on, we played a clip from the Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, who is in Jordan at this high-level, conference that is calling for, ceasefire and, of course, humanitarian assistance that can reach all areas, in Gaza by land and also by sea. I mean, what are we likely to see just from a humanitarian perspective?
It's, in my opinion, it's really difficult to say now in terms of what we are going to see in terms of humanitarian aid. But certainly, what I can say is that the pressure is on Israel to allow that whatever humanitarian aid, whether by land, by sea, by air, needs to be delivered, it needs to go through, because now they are bound by this resolution by a very powerful body, a very powerful organ of the United Nations. The conference that the minister is attending is ideal, but I think that everything, with everything going on, it rests on, the allies of these parties to put pressure. We have seen how provisional measures have been, the provisional measures orders from the International Court of Justice has been abandoned by Israel time and time and again, South Africa to go through. And I think a few weeks back when I was on SABC again, I did mention that, the International Court of Justice provisional orders, measure orders will over time lose effect, and it's, such instances, such situations need, long-drawn political and diplomatic effort to be implemented, because the court can only do a certain thing and is limited, and the rest lies on these parties, the United Nations Security Council, to try solve and find a lasting solution. So I think the conference will bring ideas on how to let humanitarian aid, or how to put pressure on Israel to let humanitarian aid go in, because at the end of the day, despite the conflict and the hostilities going on, humanitarian aid needs to be let in, because it's an important part or aspect of international law or international humanitarian law. Women, children need to have access to medical facilities, need to have access to water, need to have access to food, and civilians need to be spared out from this situation. And I hope that in the next coming few days or weeks, the Biden government will put pressure on Israel, but also one thing that we're missing out here, I think, is also how the European Union, how things are unfolding in Europe currently in the European Union Parliament elections. We see the rise of the far right in the European Union Parliament, and how will they respond to this hostility? We will need to wait and see.
All right. Thank you so much, Patrick Kadima, Wits University International Relations Analyst, for weighing in on those issues.